come on, come on, come on, come on, Michael move. Everybody, everybody, everybody saying Michael move. Just as important as understanding what individual freedom is understanding and accepting what it is not. We've spent most of our time so far talking about how we make ourselves less free and less successful by forcing our stated, if not practiced, values on our fellow humans. There is, thankfully, more general agreement that other uses of force fall clearly into the category of things that break the rules. So, to sum up, Hitler, again, is not free to invade Poland. He is infringing on the freedom of the Poles. Jefferson Davis is not free to rule a society in which some humans own other humans. He is infringing, well, more like trampling on the freedom of the African Americans. Bonnie and Clyde are not free to rob banks. They are infringing on the freedom of the depositors or the bank owners by forcibly stealing their property. Bernie Madoff is not free to lie to his investors and take their money. He is engaging in theft through fraud, which is infringing on the freedom of his investors. Exxon is not free, even by accident, to spill 500,000 gallons of crude oil into Prince William Sound unless they own it, and the spill does not affect areas they don't own, which they don't, and it did. Cyber attacks? No. Any action that infringes on the freedom of another person is breaking the rules. This falls into two main categories: physical violence and stealing, damaging, or destroying their stuff. But think about it. If one person is free to take away the freedom of another person, what does the word mean? Freedom has to apply to everyone all the time, and it must be applied in exactly the same way. And yes, it does include the freedom to be a jackass. Just not a violent or thieving jackass. Now, this brings up the question of what to do with a Hitler or a Jefferson Davis, someone who doesn't play by the rules and doesn't seem open to gentle persuasion. There's really only one possible answer. You punish the living heck out of them. Ensuring defense is the only logical, rational, non-rule breaking way that force can be used against our fellow humans. And use it sparingly, because once you choose to use it, best to go all the way. The word freedom is closely related to the word right, as in having a right to something. But whereas freedom applies broadly to all human activities, the word right must, if it's going to have any meaning, be very narrowly defined as what a very smart man once called the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. I cannot have the right to take someone else's rights away, or that word too becomes meaningless. This brings up some difficult truths. I can't have a right to food. What about the rights of the farmer who grows it? I can't have a right to medicine. What about the rights of the people who make it? And I can't have a right to confiscate someone else's money to pay for these things. My rights cannot supersede those of others because of my situation or my choices. This breaks the rules that determine the success or failure of human societies. It undercuts our most important evolutionary advantage, voluntary cooperation, and it puts in its place a system of arbitrary and punitive behavior control based on the priorities of whatever group happens to be in charge. Well, let's just restrict freedom to those that we think deserve it. Some people call this the third way of politics. Well, there are three ways. Freedom almost all of the time. This is the way to long-term peace, more prosperity for all. Freedom not much of the time. This is the way to oppression and poverty for nearly all. And freedom some of the time, defined by the majority or some other rule. Best way to sum this up is mediocrity for all. The last time I checked, mediocrity was not a great evolutionary strategy. The hard truths of freedom, and they are hard because they carry responsibilities for everyone all along the societal ladder. They bring up images of people starving in the streets or dying in droves for want of penicillin. Now, these images should remind us that starvation and disease have been greatly curtailed by human ingenuity and freedom, but too often they result in collective calls to do something that must, by necessity, curtail both freedom and ingenuity, and must, in the long run, result in more human suffering. If we see bad things happening, shouldn't that inspire us to help by driving a used car instead of that new SUV, or eating spaghetti at home instead of at a restaurant? Oh, no. Much easier to find someone else to blame. As long as it's those other bad humans over there. An unfortunate sign of our times is the redefinition of words to fit a political agenda. Everyone's for freedom, right? Do us a favor. If you're going to turn a perfectly good word into something that it's not, please make up another word. Here are a few suggestions. Freedon't, as in I have freedom, you don't. Free dip, as in I have the freedom to dip into your stuff. And free do, as in you have complete freedom to do whatever I tell you. Fred Rum. The point is, we can't start talking really until we can agree on what words mean. It might be a stretch in today's climate, but let's give it the old free college for all try.